The dead gather below my lighthouse every night, scratching at the metal door, their groans carried by the wind. They know I'm here. They know I'm alive. This is the last broadcast from the edge of the world, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. My name is Odessa, and for the past 8 months I've been running a pirate radio station from this abandoned lighthouse off the coast. The day the world went to hell, I was already here, shooting a photography project on coastal erosion. Ironic that I came to document one type of collapse only to witness another. The isolation saved me initially. By the time I realized something was wrong, the mainland was already in chaos. I watched through my telephoto lens as people ran through the streets as others chased them down with that terrible lurching gait we've all come to recognize. I stayed put, thinking help would come. No one came. The lighthouse had emergency supplies, a generator, and most importantly, radio equipment that the previous caretaker had installed. I knew basic broadcasting from a college internship, enough to figure out how to send out a signal. At first, I just wanted to reach someone, anyone who might help. But as days turned to weeks, I realized I might be more useful as a beacon for others. Every day since then, I've broadcasted at the same times: 7 in the morning, noon, and 7 in the evening. Survival tips, weather reports, emergency alerts about zombie migration patterns I observe through my binoculars, and sometimes just talking to keep whoever's listening from losing hope. To keep myself from losing hope. The equipment is simple but effective. A modified CB radio with boosted signal strength powered by the generator and supplemented by solar panels I scavenged from a nearby weather station. I've rigged up antennas to the top of the lighthouse, giving me surprisingly good range. From the calls I sometimes receive, I know people can pick me up from at least 50 miles inland. I keep meticulous logs of everything: weather conditions, zombie activity, distress calls, supply inventories. The routine keeps me sane. This morning I counted 27 of them on the narrow strip of land connecting my lighthouse to the mainland. Yesterday there were 22. The day before, 19. They're gathering, and I don't know why. Sometimes I think about the people who call in. Vera, who leads a group hiding in a mountain cabin, calling once a week to check in. The military outpost 30 miles south that sends coded messages I can't understand but broadcast anyway, hoping someone who matters can hear them. The farmer who only identifies himself as R, who tells me about his experiments growing crops that zombies avoid. I wonder if they're still alive. Some stop calling without explanation. I remember the day I claimed this lighthouse. After witnessing the chaos on the mainland, I barricaded the door and took inventory. There was enough food for 2 months if I rationed carefully. The previous caretaker had been a doomsday prepper, thank God. Canned goods, water purification tablets, medical supplies, even a small arsenal in a locked cabinet. I found the key taped under a drawer in his desk. The first broadcast was terrifying. I had no idea what to say or if anyone would hear me. I just gave my location, explained that I was safe and alone, and asked if anyone else was out there. For 3 days, nothing but static. Then a crackled response from a truck driver passing through. He was heading north looking for his family. I never heard from him again, but he was the first proof that I wasn't completely alone. As weeks passed, I established protocol. I verified new contacts by asking questions only the living could answer. Math problems, philosophical questions, emotional responses. The infected might mimic speech, but they can't reason or feel. At least that's what I tell myself when I hear strange voices on the channel late at night, speaking in broken sentences, repeating the same phrases over and over. The lighthouse itself has become both fortress and prison. I've reinforced the metal door at the base with furniture and scrap metal. The spiral staircase gives me a tactical advantage if anything ever breaks through. I've set up noise traps, tripwires with cans attached, primitive but effective for early warning. The top of the lighthouse gives me a 360-degree view of my surroundings. I sometimes spot boats in the distance, but none ever approach. I signal with the lighthouse beam, but no one signals back. My resources are dwindling despite careful rationing. I have maybe a month of food left. The generator runs on diesel and I'm down to my last can. The solar panels help, but they're not enough to power everything. especially during stormy weather. Last week I had to turn off the actual lighthouse beam to conserve energy for the radio. I wonder if that's why the zombies are gathering now. Maybe the light was keeping them away. Last night something changed. While scanning frequencies during my midnight check, I picked up a transmission unlike any before. It was clear, professional sounding, without the desperation that colors most communications these days. Attention survivors. This is a message from Operation Sanctuary. A secure zone has been established at the following coordinates. Then came a string of numbers that I hurriedly wrote down, plotting them on my map. It's a location about 70 miles inland, a former military installation according to my outdated atlas. The voice continued. Medical services, food, shelter, and protection available. Screening protocols in place. Broadcasts daily at noon on this frequency. If you can reach us, we can help you. This is not a test. The transmission repeated 3 times before cutting out. I tried to respond, to ask questions, but no one answered. I've been scanning that frequency all day, waiting for noon, but I heard nothing. Was it real? A trap? A hallucination born from my increasing isolation? I reported it during my evening broadcast, cautious but hopeful. 3 of my regular contacts called in immediately, asking for details. I gave them the coordinates but warned them to approach with caution. Vera said she might send a scout. R said it sounded too good to be true. The military outpost went silent after I mentioned it, which worries me. As I look out my window now, I can see more zombies gathering at the base of the lighthouse. 34 now. They seem more active than usual, clawing at the walls, pressing against the door. The metal groans under their collective weight. Something's changing in their behavior. They used to wander aimlessly, but now they seem focused, determined. Last week I spotted one that looked different. Most zombies I've observed are in various states of decay, clothing torn and dirty, moving with that characteristic shambling gait. But this one stood straighter, watched the lighthouse with what seemed like deliberation, and then wandered off only to return with more. It wore what looked like military fatigues. The thought that they might be evolving, developing rudimentary planning skills keeps me awake at night. The decision I face grows more urgent by the hour. Do I stay here, maintaining my broadcasts for whoever might be listening, until my supplies run out or the zombies find a way in? Or do I risk everything, on this promise of sanctuary, attempting to navigate through 70 miles of zombie-infested territory with whatever I can carry? If I leave, what happens to those who rely on my broadcasts? Vera checks in for weather reports before moving her group. R shares his agricultural findings with other survivors through me. I've become a hub of information in a world where information can mean survival. But if I stay, I die. Simple as that. The generator will fail, the food will run out, the door will eventually give way. The choice seems obvious when I put it that way, yet I hesitate. There was a supply run I made 3 months ago to a small coastal store about a mile away. I prepared for days, studying zombie movements, planning my route, packing only essentials. I left at dawn, moved silently, reached the store without incident. It had been picked over but not completely. I found canned food, batteries, medicine. As I was heading back, a pack of 6 zombies cut me off from my direct route. I had to hide in a drainage pipe for hours, listening to them shuffle past, my heart pounding so loud I was certain they would hear it. When I finally made it back to the lighthouse, I swore I would never leave again unless absolutely necessary. Is sanctuary 70 miles away necessary enough? Is it even real? The military outpost's silence after I mentioned the transmission nags at me. They've never failed to respond to important news before. Do they know something? Is the sanctuary legitimate or some kind of trap? In the early days, there were rumors of groups using promises of safety to lure survivors into ambushes. Resources are valuable. Desperate people do desperate things. The morning after I received the transmission, I noticed fresh tire tracks on the narrow strip of land connecting my lighthouse to the shore. Someone had driven up close, then turned around. I never saw the vehicle. I never heard an engine. But the tracks were there, cutting through the mud, recent enough that the previous night's light rain hadn't washed them away. My hand instinctively moves to the revolver I keep at my side at all times. 6 bullets. I've never had to use it, but I clean it every day. Check the action, make sure it works. Not all threats come from the dead. The zombies at the door are becoming more insistent. The metal creaks and groans under their collective pressure. I've started moving essentials to the upper levels of the lighthouse, preparing for the possibility that they might breach the ground floor. Food, water, ammunition, medical supplies, the portable radio equipment. If they get in, I can retreat upward, seal the hatches between levels. Buy myself time. Time for what, though? To make a decision I should have made days ago? I've plotted the route to the sanctuary. Coordinates. If the roads are clear, it would take about 2 hours by car. But I don't have a car and the roads won't be clear. On foot, avoiding main thoroughfares, it could take anywhere from 3 days to a week. I have a backpack ready, filled with just enough supplies to make the journey if I'm careful and lucky. I've included my broadcast log in case I don't make it. Someone should know what happened here. The zombies have never been this organized before. It's as if they're taking shifts, some pushing at the door while others rest, then rotating. I've read accounts of herd behavior in infected populations, but this seems different. More coordinated. I've started to wonder if they're being directed somehow. That military zombie I spotted worries me. If some of them retain fragments of their former intelligence, what else might they be capable of? Could they be setting traps, planning ambushes? The thought seems paranoid, but paranoia keeps you alive these days. I need to make a decision by morning. Stay and maintain my post until the inevitable happens, or risk everything on a promise of sanctuary that might not exist. As I consider my options, I find myself thinking about my listeners, the survivors who tune in. What would they want me to do? Would they understand if my voice suddenly disappeared from their radios? The sun is setting now. In the dying light, I can see more shapes moving along the shore, heading toward my lighthouse. The zombies below have grown to a crowd of near 50. They never gather in these numbers, not here, not at my isolated outpost. I think about the transmission again, about its timing, about the tire tracks that appeared afterward, about the military outpost going silent, about the organized zombie behavior. Are they connected? Am I seeing patterns where none exist because isolation has made me paranoid? Or am I noticing the subtle signs of a trap because isolation has made me more observant? I check my watch. It's almost time for my evening broadcast. The familiar routine calls to me, offering the comfort of normalcy in a world gone mad. As I adjust the dials and prepare my notes, I make my decision. I will tell my listeners about the sanctuary one more time, share the coordinates, warn them to approach with caution. I will tell them that tomorrow's broadcast may be my last from this location. I will not tell them which direction I'm heading, in case someone unfriendly is listening. The microphone feels heavy in my hand as I switch it on. The static clears. My voice sounds steadier than I feel as I begin. This is Odessa Broadcasting. From the lighthouse. If you can hear me, you are not alone. The time is 7 in the evening. The weather is clear, visibility good. Zombie activity has increased significantly in my area. I count 50 plus at my location, showing unusual coordination. Exercise extreme caution if you're anywhere near the coast. I pause, listening to the groans from below, the metal door straining against its hinges. I make my final decision and continue. Yesterday, I received a transmission about a sanctuary 70 miles inland. I will repeat the coordinates now. I cannot verify its authenticity, but tomorrow at first light I'm going to find out. This may be my last regular broadcast from the lighthouse. If you're listening, if you've come to rely on these transmissions, I'm sorry. Sometimes survival means taking risks. Sometimes it means making choices that affect others. I hope to broadcast again from somewhere safer, somewhere with more resources, somewhere I can be more help to you all. The words catch in my throat. I've been alone so long that these invisible listeners have become my community, my responsibility. Abandoning them feels like betrayal, but staying means certain death. The decision hardens within me as the door below gives an ominous crack. If anyone is near enough to attempt a rescue or join forces, I'll leave my blue emergency light on tonight. Otherwise, I move out at dawn. This is Odessa, signing off from the lighthouse. Stay safe. Stay human. I'll find you again if I can. I set down the microphone and begin my final preparations. Whatever happens tomorrow, tonight might be my last in this place that has been both my salvation and my prison. I check my weapons, secure my pack, and take one last look at the horizon through my telescope. In the gathering darkness, I could swear I see a light blinking in the distance, a pattern too regular to be natural. Someone out there is signaling. Someone heard me. Perhaps I'm not as alone as I thought. My father was the first to turn. I watched his eyes change, his humanity slip away hour by hour. They call him Patient Zero, but I call him Dad. I'm his daughter, and I carry his blood, his genes, and his secret. They would kill me if they knew. My name is Thalia, and I've been living in the Eastern Military Research Compound for nearly 2 years now. When the outbreak first began, I was just a college student with a part-time job at a coffee shop. My father was a research virologist at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. He called me one night, his voice shaking. He told me he loved me, told me to lock my doors and not let anyone in. Not even him. Especially not him. I didn't understand until the news report started the next morning. A new, highly contagious pathogen, initial cases in my city, martial law being implemented. By then, my father's name was already being circulated as the likely index case, Patient Zero, the man who brought the end of the world. What nobody knows, what I've kept hidden all this time, is that I was with him the night before his call. We had dinner together. He seemed fine, tired maybe, but nothing unusual for a man who regularly worked 16-hour days. He hugged me. Goodbye. If the infection was already in him, logic says I should have caught it too, but I didn't. When the military started rounding up survivors a month into the outbreak, they screened everyone for infection. Blood tests, temperature checks, reflex assessments, cognitive evaluations. I passed them all. I was clean. Somehow I was immune. I should have told them who I was then. Maybe it could have helped their research, but fear kept me silent. By that point, my father's name was synonymous with disaster. People spoke of him with the same venom they used for history's worst monsters. What would they do to the daughter of Patient Zero? So I gave them a fake name. Told them my family was dead. Let them assign me quarters in the civilian section of the compound, where I've been working in the hydroponics garden ever since. It's not a terrible life. We have food, security, purpose. The military protects us from the infected that still roam outside our walls. At least that's what I thought until yesterday. I was delivering the weekly harvest to the science building. Usually I just leave the crates in the receiving area, but a researcher dropped his keycard and I followed him through a secure door to return it. That's when I heard them talking in the lab. The blood work confirmed it. She's genetically related to Patient Zero. My heart nearly stopped. I froze just beyond the doorway, pressed against the wall. The voices continued, oblivious to my presence. Does she know we've identified her? No, and we need to keep it that way. If she runs, we lose our best chance at understanding natural immunity. The cerebral tissue samples will be crucial. We'll need to conduct the procedure while the brain is still alive to observe the active immune response. Schedule it for tomorrow night. Minimal staff. Listed as a standard necropsy on a recently deceased infected. I didn't wait to hear more. I slipped away, returned to my quarters, and pretended everything was normal. Inside, my mind was racing. Cerebral tissue samples. The procedure. They were planning to sacrifice me for research. All those blood draws they said were routine health checks, the additional physical exams, the cognitive tests. They weren't protecting me. They were studying me. And now they had decided I was more valuable dissected than alive. The compound operates on strict schedules. Meals, work shifts, curfews, all precisely timed. After dinner, everyone must be in their assigned quarters by 8 in the evening. Lights out by 10. Guard rotations change at midnight and 4 in the morning. I'd noticed these patterns, but never had reason to care about them until now. My quarter is small but private, a rare luxury in the compound. A single bed, a desk, a tiny bathroom. The walls are thin, I can hear my neighbors breathing sometimes. I've decorated it with drawings, sketches of the world before, mountains I visited, oceans I swam in, my father smiling on a hiking trail. No one has ever questioned why I don't have photos. Those would show my face, my father's face. The resemblance would be obvious to anyone looking for it. I spent the night planning my escape. The compound has 3 sections: civilian quarters, military operations, and research facilities. Between each section are checkpoints requiring keycards. The entire compound is surrounded by 3 layers of security: an inner fence, a no man's land with mines and traps, and an outer wall topped with guard towers. No one escapes the compound. At least that's what they tell us. But I've heard rumors of gaps in security, of paths through the minefield known only to certain guards. I've made friends during my time here, cultivated relationships with people who might help me without realizing what they're doing. Private Elric works hydroponic security. He has a sweet tooth and loves the strawberries I save for him from the special research crop. Captain Lavenza oversees civilian assignments, and once mentioned her sister had the same unusual eye color as me, heterochromia, 1 blue eye and 1 hazel. Dr. Winslow in medical gave me extra pain relievers for my migraines without logging them, a small kindness in a place where every pill is counted. These people aren't my friends, not really. They're connections, potential tools for survival. That sounds cold, but the world is cold now. My father taught me to be practical above all else. Speaking of my father, there's something I haven't mentioned yet. Something I've only seen twice, something that haunts my nightmares. The infected in this compound aren't all mindless shamblers. Some of them retain fragments of who they were. The military keeps these specimens in the research wing for study. 2 months ago, during another delivery, I glimpsed into a containment room through a window. One of the infected looked directly at me. Its milky eyes widened. Its mouth opened and closed as if trying to speak. It pressed a gray hand against the glass, fingers splayed. I would have thought nothing of it, just another infected reacting to movement, except for one detail. It had 6 fingers on its right hand. A genetic quirk, just like my father. I ran before anyone could see my reaction. Could he still be alive, in some terrible, twisted way? Could some spark of his consciousness remain? The thought makes my escape both more urgent and more complicated. I can't leave him here, not if there's any part of him left. This morning I went about my routine as if nothing were wrong. Breakfast in the mess hall at 6. Work in the hydroponics bay from 7 until noon. Lunch. More work until 5. Dinner. Throughout the day, I gathered what I needed. A box cutter from the supply closet, hidden in my sock. A map of the compound I've been secretly creating over months, updated with new details I've overheard or observed. Extra food slipped into my pockets. The small medical kit Dr. Winslow gave me for the garden, now filled with my hoarded pain pills and antibiotics. After dinner, instead of returning to my quarters, I found Private Elric. I told him I had forgotten to water a new experimental crop and needed to return to hydroponics. He hesitated, but then swiped his card to let me through, unable to resist when I promised him the first ripe berries. That got me into the agricultural section after hours. From there, I used the service corridors that run between sections. These narrow hallways are used by maintenance staff to access utilities without disrupting daily operations. I've befriended enough janitors to know the basic layout. The corridors aren't monitored as heavily as main hallways, but they still have occasional security cameras and checkpoints. I moved slowly, carefully, stopping whenever I heard voices or footsteps. The service corridor from hydroponics connects to the research wing through a maintenance tunnel that runs beneath the main building. It took me almost an hour to navigate it without being seen. The research wing is the most heavily secured area of the compound, not just because of the valuable equipment and data, but because this is where they keep the live infected specimens. The air smells different here, antiseptic with an underlying sweetness that turns my stomach. It's the smell of decay masked by chemicals. I used a ventilation shaft to bypass the main entrance. The shaft was narrow, dusty, and at one point passed directly over a lab where researchers were working late. I held my breath as I inched past, praying the metal wouldn't creak under my weight. When I emerged, I was in a dimly lit hallway lined with doors. Each door had a small window and a digital display showing vital signs. Specimen containment. This is where they keep the infected they're studying. I moved from door to door, peering through each window. Most contained standard infected, strapped to beds or confined in small spaces, instruments monitoring their every function. Some were missing limbs or had portions of their skulls removed, revealing the gray matter beneath. These weren't people anymore, just subjects, lab rats for the pursuit of a cure. Then I found him. The six-fingered infected. My father. He was strapped to a bed, tubes running into his arms, his chest, his skull. His skin was gray, mottled with black where veins had burst beneath the surface. His eyes were closed, but a monitor showed brain activity, erratic but present. The door required a key card, one I didn't have. But beside it was an intercom system, used to communicate with the specimens without entering the room. I pressed the button. "Dad?" My voice was barely a whisper, but his eyes snapped open instantly. They were clouded, the irises barely visible, but they fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "It's Thalia." His mouth opened, but what came out wasn't words, just a low groan that rose in pitch until it became almost a whine. His body strained against the restraints. The monitors showed his heart rate increasing, his brain activity spiking. "I'm going to get out of here," I told him, not sure if he could understand. "They know who I am. They're going to kill me." His thrashing increased. One of the restraints on his wrist tore loose. An alarm began to sound, distant but approaching. I'd triggered something, either a noise sensor in his room or a proximity alert on the door. "I'm sorry," I said, backing away. "I'm so sorry." As I turned to run, I caught his eye one more time. The infected, cloudy gaze seemed to clear for just a moment. His lips formed a shape I recognized, though no sound came out. A word. A simple word he used to say to me all my life. "Go." I ran. Through the hallways, back toward the ventilation shaft. But the shaft entrance was already blocked by security personnel responding to the alarm. I had to find another way. The research wing has emergency exits, required by building code. They trigger alarms when opened, but at this point, stealth was already compromised. I headed for the nearest exit, pushing through doors, ignoring shouts behind me. The exit led to a narrow passage between buildings, part of the compound's internal structure but outside the main hallways. Guards would be converging on the research wing from all directions, but they'd expect me to head for the outer perimeter immediately. Instead, I doubled back toward the military section. Captain Lavenza had mentioned once that she kept spare keycards in her office for emergencies. If I could reach it, I might be able to access areas normally restricted to civilian workers like me. The military section was quieter at night than during the day, but still staffed. I moved from shadow to shadow, using what I'd learned from watching the guards. They patrol in patterns predictable if you pay attention. I counted seconds between rounds, waited for the right moment, then sprinted across open areas. Captain Lavenza's office was locked but not secured with a keycard reader, just a standard mechanical lock. I'd picked enough locks in college when roommates would lock themselves out that this presented little challenge. Inside, I found what I was looking for, a small lockbox containing emergency keycards. Armed with high-level access, I moved more confidently through the compound. The alarm from the research wing had triggered increased security everywhere, but with the keycard I could appear to belong in most areas. I wore my hydroponics uniform and walked with purpose, nodding to guards as if I had every right to be there. My real destination was the Eastern Supply Gate. It's used primarily for bringing in provisions and is less heavily monitored than the main entrance. Vehicles come and go throughout the day, but at night it's closed. However, the guard station is minimally staffed, often with just 2 soldiers who spend most of their time watching monitors rather than the actual gate. I was nearly there when I turned a corner and came face to face with Dr. Winslow. The doctor's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with suspicion. "Thalia? What are you doing in this section at this hour?" I froze, mind racing. Dr. Winslow had been kind to me, but would that kindness extend to helping me escape? I decided honesty was my only option. "They know who my father is," I said, quietly. "They're planning to dissect my brain while I'm still alive." Dr. Winslow's expression shifted from suspicion to horror, then to resolution. Without a word, the doctor pulled me into a nearby supply closet and closed the door. "How did you find out?" "I overheard researchers talking. They've scheduled the procedure for tonight." Dr. Winslow leaned against the door, eyes closed for a moment. "I knew they were researching natural immunity, but this crosses every ethical line. Will you help me?" A long pause. Then, "The supply truck leaves at midnight for the secondary research facility. The driver is my cousin. He can get you past the outer checkpoints." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The truck will only get you outside the compound. After that, you're on your own in infected territory. I'll take my chances out there over certain death in here." Dr. Winslow nodded, then removed a lab coat hanging on the wall and handed it to me. "Put this on. Medical staff have less restricted movement at night. I'll walk you to the loading bay." With Dr. Winslow beside me, I passed through the remaining checkpoints without issue. The doctor explained to guards that I was a new lab assistant helping transfer sensitive materials to the secondary facility. No one questioned it. The loading bay was busy despite the late hour. The supply truck was being filled with crates of research equipment and medical supplies. "Doctor." Winslow introduced me to the driver, a weathered man with the same kind eyes as the doctor. "Hide her in the equipment lockers," Dr. Winslow instructed. "Don't stop for anyone until you're past the final checkpoint." The driver nodded, helping me climb into the back of the truck among the crates. He showed me a long metal container designed to transport sensitive equipment. "It's ventilated," he explained. "You can breathe in there, but it will be tight." As I prepared to climb in, Dr. Winslow pressed something into my hand. A small vial of clear liquid. "Immunity booster," the doctor explained. "We give it to staff who work directly with the infected. It won't prevent transmission, but it might buy you time if you're bitten." The container was cramped and dark. I lay flat on my back, the metal cold against my skin, and listened as the driver secured the lid. Not locked, he had assured me, but closed enough to avoid detection. The truck engine started, vibrating through the container. We began to move. The journey through the compound's checkpoints was tense. 3 times we stopped, and I heard voices. The shuffle of feet around the truck, the thump of what might have been the butt of a rifle against crates being inspected. Each time we were allowed to continue. After what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes, the truck slowed and then stopped completely. The driver's voice came muffled through the container. "We're clear of the compound. I'll let you out now, but this is as far as I go." When the lid opened, I blinked against even the dim light of the truck's interior. The driver helped me out, looking nervously through the windshield at the dark road ahead. "There's a settlement about 15 miles north," he said, pointing into the darkness. "They're independent, not military. They might take you in if you're useful." "What about the infected?" "They're everywhere, but thinner out here than in the cities. Move quietly, stay off the main roads, travel by day when you can see them coming." He handed me a backpack. "Food for a week if you ration it. Water purification tablets. Basic first aid. A knife. It's not much." "It's more than I had. Thank you." With a nod, he returned to the cab of the truck. "Good luck, Talia. Your father was a good man, whatever they say now." Before I could ask how he knew my father, the truck was pulling away, leaving me alone on the dark road. I stood there for a moment, the enormity of what I'd done washing over me. I was free of the compound, but now faced a world overrun by the infected, with only my mysterious immunity and a backpack of supplies to keep me alive. As I turned to head north, I noticed movement in the tree line to my right. Slow, shambling movement that could only be one thing. Not just one, but several. Infected, drawn perhaps by the sound of the truck. I should have been terrified. Anyone else would have run. But as they emerged from the trees, their vacant eyes somehow finding me in the darkness, something strange happened. They paused. Their usual aggressive advance slowed, heads tilting as if confused. One stepped forward, closer than the others. In the moonlight, I could see its features. Once human, now twisted by the disease. It sniffed the air, a curiously animal gesture. Then it did something no infected had ever been reported to do. It stepped aside, creating a path for me through their midst. The others followed suit, forming a corridor of still, watching, infected. None reached for me. None made the terrible sounds I'd heard them make when sensing prey. As I cautiously walked between them, heart pounding, a terrible understanding began to form. They recognized something in me, something familiar. My father's blood. Patient Zero's daughter. I was immune, yes. But I was also something else. Something they sensed. Something they responded to. And for the first time since the outbreak began, I wondered if my immunity might be more curse than blessing. The zombies walked right past me again today. While they tore my companions apart, they acted like I wasn't even there. It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's my eyes. As my vision fades, I've become invisible to them. And that's why they all depend on me now. My name is Kestrel. Before the world fell apart, I was a wildlife photographer specializing in predator behavior. I'd spend weeks in the field, documenting how hunters stalk their prey. Never imagined I'd use those skills to help people survive the deadliest predators of all. The irony is that I'm going blind. Retinitis pigmentosa, they called it, a progressive disease that starts by stealing your peripheral vision and night sight, then slowly closes in until you're left in darkness. When the outbreak began, I was already down to about 30 degrees of visual field, like looking through a narrow tube with blurry edges. I figured my condition would be a death sentence in this new world. How do you avoid zombies you can't see coming? How do you find food when you can barely make out what's 10 feet in front of you? I was wrong. My failing eyesight turned out to be my greatest asset. I discovered it by accident 3 months after everything collapsed. I was holed up in an abandoned ranger station in Blackwood National Forest, where I'd been shooting a documentary on wolf packs. The station had decent supplies, a radio that picked up nothing but static, and most importantly, isolation. For weeks, I saw no one, living or dead. Then one morning, I spotted movement on the forest path. A shambling figure, clearly infected, heading straight for the station. I had a rifle but limited ammunition. I didn't want to waste a bullet or attract more with the noise. So I crouched behind a fallen tree, perfectly still. A technique I'd learned photographing easily startled wildlife. The infected got within 15 feet of me, close enough that I could smell the rot. It paused, head swiveling, sensing something. Then it just walked away. I thought I'd gotten lucky. The next day, 3 of them appeared. Again, I hid, barely, breathing. Again, they passed within feet of me without reacting. That's when I began to suspect it wasn't luck. I tested my theory carefully over the next week. The infected seemed to hunt primarily by sight, with hearing and smell as secondary senses. They'd react to loud noises, certainly, but their focus was visual. Somehow, my particular way of moving, my stillness, the way my damaged eyes processed visual information and guided my actions, made me effectively invisible to them. It wasn't that they couldn't see me at all. If I moved suddenly or made noise, they'd react. But their brains, damaged by whatever caused this nightmare, seemed to filter me out of their awareness when I moved in certain ways that came naturally to me because of how I compensated for my vision loss. I'd been a photographer long enough to understand something about how different species perceive the world. Predators are highly attuned to movement. Their brains are wired to notice anything that moves like prey. Whatever rewired the brains of the infected seemed to create similar filters, but with a glitch I could exploit. The first survivors I encountered confirmed my theory wasn't just desperate hope. A family of 4, parents and 2 teenage children, stumbled upon my ranger station while fleeing a horde. I helped them inside, then watched through the window as the infected surrounded the building, clawing at the doors and windows. "How did you survive out here alone?" the father asked me. These woods are crawling with them. I explained my condition and my theory. They were skeptical until I demonstrated. I walked outside, moving the way I'd learned to move, and passed through a dozen infected without triggering their aggression. When I returned, the family looked at me like I was performing miracles. That was the beginning. Word spread among survivor groups. Soon I was guiding people through infected areas, teaching them what I could about moving undetected, though no one could replicate my success rate. My vision continued to deteriorate, but my other senses sharpened to compensate. I could hear the subtle differences between infected and human footsteps, smell the distinctive decay of the turned, feel air currents change when something large moved nearby. 6 months into the outbreak, I was leading a group of 11 survivors. We were a motley crew. Venora, a former emergency room nurse with a wicked sense of humor even in the darkest moments. Riz, a college student who'd been studying mechanical engineering before everything fell apart, now using those skills to maintain our equipment. The Hadley siblings, Finn and Phoenix, 10 and 12 years old, orphaned in the first wave, now looked after by all of us. There were others, each with their own skills and stories. Together we moved from place to place, scavenging what we needed, avoiding large hordes, surviving. They protected me when my vision made things difficult. I guided them past dangers they couldn't avoid on their own. We developed a system. During daylight, when my vision was at its best, I'd scout ahead. At night, when I was effectively blind, others would take watch while I focused on listening for approaching danger. It worked mostly. We lost people sometimes, everyone does in this world, but we survived. That brings me to yesterday, and why I'm telling this story now. We needed supplies, medical especially. Venora's kit was running low on essentials, and Finn had developed a cough that worried all of us. Our maps showed a shopping mall about 5 miles from our current camp. Malls are risky, usually heavily infested, but they also contain everything, from pharmaceuticals to food to clothing. We decided it was worth the risk. I went ahead to scout as usual. The mall parking lot was a graveyard of abandoned vehicles, some with doors still open, others crushed together where panicked drivers had collided in their haste to escape. The main entrance was clear of visible infected, but that meant nothing. They could be anywhere inside. I returned to our camp and outlined what I'd seen. We made a plan. Enter through a service corridor I'd spotted, move quietly to the pharmacy first, then to sporting goods for weapons and tools, and finally to the grocery store for any preserved food that might remain. Remember, I told the group as we prepared to move out, stay close to me, move how I move. If we get separated, hide and wait. Don't try to fight your way out unless you have no other choice. We approached the mall at dawn when my vision is best and the infected seemed slightly less active. The service entrance was locked, but Riz made quick work of it with the tools he carried. Inside, the corridors were dark, illuminated only by emergency lights running on backup power. I led the way, moving with the careful gait I'd developed. Heel to toe, weight distributed evenly, no sudden movements. The others followed, trying to mimic my style. We encountered 3 infected in the first hallway, maintenance workers judging by their tattered uniforms. They turned toward our group, but their milky eyes slid past me as if I wasn't there. The others weren't so lucky. One of the infected lunged toward Venora, but Phoenix put it down with a well-placed knife thrust through the eye socket. We'd all become efficient killers by necessity. The pharmacy was our first stop. Most of the good stuff had been looted early in the outbreak, but Venora knew where to look for overlooked medications. Behind the counter, in locked cabinets, under fallen shelves, she found enough to restock her kit. Antibiotics for Finn's cough, pain relievers, disinfectants, everything we needed. The sporting goods store was next. Here we found genuine treasures. Hunting knives still in their packages, a compound bow with arrows, camping supplies including water purification tablets and freeze-dried meals. Riz discovered a locked case containing high-end flashlights and batteries. Even found a pair of night vision goggles, which he immediately insisted I should have. They might help you see at night, he said, pressing them into my hands. I tried them on briefly. The green-tinted world they showed me was blurry and disorienting with my condition, but I took them anyway. Anything that might help was worth carrying. Our final stop was the grocery store, where we hoped to find canned goods and other non-perishables. By this point, we'd been in the mall for nearly 2 hours without major incident. We'd encountered infected, certainly, but either avoided them or dispatched them quietly. That changed as we entered the grocery section. The first sign of trouble was the smell, stronger than the general decay that permeated everywhere now. Then the sound, a constant soft shuffling punctuated by occasional moans. I held up my hand, signaling the group to stop, and peered ahead. My limited vision showed shapes moving between the aisles, dozens of them. The grocery store had become a nest. "We need to turn back," I whispered. "There are too many." We began retreating slowly, but Phoenix stumbled against a display of canned goods, sending metal containers clattering across the floor. The shuffling stopped. Then came the moans, louder now, and the sound of many feet beginning to move in our direction. "Run," I said, abandoning stealth. "Back to the sporting goods store. We can barricade ourselves in." We fled, the infected pursuing. In the confined space of the mall corridors, my usual invisibility proved less effective. The infected were in hunting mode now, fully alert to movement and sound. They still seemed less aware of me than the others, but the advantage was diminished. We reached the sporting goods store and began piling shelving units against the glass entrance. The infected arrived moments later, pressing against the barricade, their combined weight making the metal shelves groan. "It won't hold for long," Riz said, frantically looking around for something to reinforce our defenses. Venora was already organizing our emergency supplies, readying medkits and weapons. The Hadley siblings huddled together, trying to stay calm. The other members of our group took up defensive positions, makeshift weapons ready. I stood back, thinking. The store had no rear exit. The ventilation ducts were too small for anyone but perhaps the smallest child to navigate. We were trapped unless we found another way out. "The ceiling," I said suddenly. "Commercial buildings like this often have maintenance walkways above the drop ceiling for electrical work, HVAC, that sort of thing." Riz immediately understood. We could move to another store, one not surrounded by infected. We pushed a display case underneath a section of ceiling that looked promising and began removing tiles. Sure enough, above the fluorescent lights was a metal framework strong enough to support a person's weight. One by one, our group climbed up into the ceiling space. It was dusty, dark, and cramped, but navigable. Riz went first, then helped the others up. I went last, making sure everyone was safely above before climbing up myself. We moved slowly through the ceiling space, careful to distribute our weight across the metal framework, rather than the flimsy ceiling tiles. Below us, we could hear the infected breaking through our barricade, filling the store we'd just abandoned. After about 50 yards, Riz stopped. "I think we're above another store now. Different ceiling pattern." We carefully removed a ceiling tile and peered down. It was a clothing store, seemingly empty of infected. One by one, we lowered ourselves down. The store offered a temporary respite, but we still needed to find a way out of the mall. That's when we heard it, the distinctive sound of a helicopter. "Someone else is here," Venora said, moving cautiously toward the store entrance to look out into the main concourse of the mall. Through the glass frontage, we could see a group of armed individuals moving methodically through the mall. They wore matching tactical gear and moved with military precision. "Military?" Riz suggested hopefully. I studied their movement, the way they checked corners, communicated with hand signals. Maybe, or well-organized survivors. We debated whether to make ourselves known. If they were military, they might have a secure base, supplies, medical care for Finn. But we'd encountered hostile groups before, people who took what they wanted by force. The decision was made for us when one of the armed groups spotted our movement through the glass. They approached cautiously, weapons raised but not aimed directly at us. "Identify yourselves," called a woman's voice, authoritative but not threatening. I stepped forward as our usual spokesperson. "Survivors, like you. We came for supplies." The woman studied us through the glass, noting our ragtag appearance, the children among us. She lowered her weapon slightly. How many infected did you encounter on the west side? We didn't come from the west, I replied. We entered through the service corridor on the east. This seemed to surprise her. The east approach is heavily infested. We lost 2 people just reconnoitering it. I hesitated, then decided honesty was our best approach. I have an advantage when it comes to infected. My vision condition seems to make me less visible to them. The woman raised an eyebrow but didn't dismiss my claim outright. After a brief radio conversation with someone I couldn't see, she motioned for her team to stand down. I'm Major Harlow. We're a recon team from Camp Sanctuary, assessing this location for a potential supply run. If what you're saying about the infected is true, we're very interested in talking further. Camp Sanctuary. We'd heard rumors of a large organized settlement about 100 miles north, but had dismissed most of it as wishful thinking. Yet here was evidence it existed. Major Harlow escorted us to their temporary command post in what had once been the mall's security office. They had communications equipment, detailed maps, and enough firepower to make me feel simultaneously safer and more nervous. Explain this ability of yours, Harlow said once we were settled. I detailed my condition and my theory about why the infected seemed less aware of me. Harlow listened without interruption, then asked several pointed questions about specific encounters, my success rate, and whether I'd noticed any patterns or exceptions. Our scientists have theories about how the infected perceive the world, she said finally. Your experience supports some of their hypotheses. They'd be very interested in studying your interaction with the infected. The word studying sent a chill through me. I'd heard too many stories of survivors being used as test subjects in the name of finding a cure. Harlow seemed to read my concern. Voluntarily, of course. Camp Sanctuary operates on consent and contribution. Everyone contributes what they can to the community's survival. It sounded too good to be true, but our options were limited. Winter was approaching, and our nomadic lifestyle would become increasingly dangerous with colder weather. A secure settlement with walls, supplies, and organization offered our best chance of survival. We need to finish our mission here, Harlow continued. But we can extract with you when our helicopter returns in 3 hours. I can't promise anything until our leadership meets you, but people with your unique ability would be highly valued. We agreed to join them. While waiting for extraction, we helped their team secure additional supplies. It was during this joint operation that I truly demonstrated my ability. A section of the mall we needed to traverse was heavily infested. Rather than engage in a potentially costly clearing operation, I offered to lead a small team through. Harlow was skeptical, but allowed it. I took 2 of her soldiers, teaching them to mimic my movements as best they could. We passed through, a group of over 30 infected with minimal engagement. When we returned with the needed medical supplies, Harlow looked at me with newfound respect and perhaps a touch of fear. The helicopter arrived as promised. As we prepared to board, one of Harlow's team approached me privately. Your condition, he said quietly. The way they don't see you. It's not just your movement or your eyes. I waited for him to continue. I've seen this before. There was a research project pre-outbreak studying neurological conditions that affect visual processing. Some subjects showed altered brain activity that made them process movement differently. The same regions are affected by the infection. What are you saying? I'm saying your brain might be the key to understanding the infected, maybe even to finding a cure. Before I could ask more questions, we were called to board. As the helicopter lifted off, I looked down at the mall, now swarming with infected drawn by the noise. Among them, I noticed one that moved differently from the others, more deliberately. It looked up at the helicopter, tracking its movement in a way the others didn't. It made me wonder, are they evolving? Learning? And if they are, how long before my advantage disappears? That was yesterday. Now we're approaching what they call Camp Sanctuary. From the air it looks impressive. High walls, organized agriculture, solar arrays, even running vehicles. A real community surviving against all odds. But I can't shake what that soldier told me, or the implications of it. If my brain really is key to understanding the infected, what will that mean for me? Will I be a valued community member, or a research subject? And what happens when my vision deteriorates further, as it inevitably will? The helicopter begins its descent. Below, people gather to watch our arrival. I can just make out their faces turned upward, expressions unreadable at this distance. Among them are uniformed figures, weapons visible. As we touch down, I realize I'm facing a choice similar to the one that brought me to the mall. Step forward, into unknown danger, or retreat into familiar hardship. Neither guarantees survival. The helicopter door opens. Major Harlow gestures for me to exit first. Behind me, my group watches, waiting for my lead as they always do. Ahead lies Camp Sanctuary, with all its promise and potential peril. I take a deep breath and step out into the light, moving the way I always move, careful and measured, ready to navigate whatever new dangers await, seen or unseen. They call me a traitor for keeping them alive. I run an underground hospice for the infected before they turn completely. The military executes them immediately, but I've discovered something they don't want anyone to know. The infection has a window where it can be reversed. My name is Zahir. Before the world collapsed, I was a neurologist specializing in degenerative brain disorders. Now I operate what might be the most dangerous medical facility in what remains of our civilization, an abandoned subway station where I care for people in the early stages of zombie infection. The government calls them the condemned. Military. Protocol dictates immediate execution upon confirmation of infection. One bite, one scratch breaking the skin, and you get a bullet in the head. They call it mercy. I call it murder. I discovered the truth by accident 3 months ago. I was working at a military processing center, screening refugees for signs of infection. Standard procedure was to separate the infected, inform them they were contaminated, allow them a moment to make peace, then escort them to the resolution room. That day, a young woman came through with her infant son. She had a small, partially hidden scratch on her shoulder. She knew what would happen if I reported it, so she begged me to let them pass. The child was unharmed, perfectly healthy. Something in her eyes, the desperation of a mother trying to save not herself but her child, broke through my clinical detachment. I falsified her screening, marking her as clean, and directed her to quarantine section C, where I worked after hours. I told her I would check on her, bring formula for the baby. I expected to find her turned within 24 hours, at which point I would have to make a terrible decision about the child. But when I returned, she was feverish, but lucid. The scratch looked infected, but not with the telltale black veins of the contagion. This contradicted everything in the military medical protocols. According to them, infection progressed predictably. Exposure, incubation for 2 to 12 hours depending on proximity to vital areas, followed by fever, delirium, aggression, and finally complete transformation within 24 hours. Yet here she was, 30 hours post-exposure, still human. I began monitoring her secretly, bringing medication to reduce the fever, collecting blood samples, observing the progression. After 72 hours, her condition stabilized. The scratch healed. The fever broke. She didn't turn. This single case challenged everything we'd been told about the infection. I needed more data, more cases to study. So I began my dangerous work. The subway station had been abandoned early in the outbreak when the transit systems shut down. It was deep enough underground to muffle sounds, with multiple access points and a complex ventilation system. The military had cleared it once, but deemed it low priority for regular patrols, focusing instead on above-ground thoroughfares and strategic locations. I converted the old break room into a medical ward with scavenged equipment. The ticket booth became my lab, illuminated by battery-powered lights. I established security measures, tripwires with noise alarms, escape routes, quarantine protocols for patients who showed signs of turning despite intervention. Then I began identifying patients. I couldn't save everyone, but I focused on those with peripheral injuries, minor exposures that gave the greatest chance of recovery. I recruited others who had lost family to the mercy protocol, people who understood the moral imperative of what I was doing. Elena, a former EMT. Darius, who had worked security at the hospital where I once practiced. Michaela, a pharmaceutical rep who knew how to access locked medication supplies. We developed a system. During intake screenings at military checkpoints, our network would identify potential candidates, those with minimal exposure who might survive with proper care. We'd mark them for Quarantine Section C, then divert them to our underground facility instead of the resolution room. For months, we operated in secret. Most patients died despite our efforts, their bodies properly disposed of to prevent further infection. But some, nearly 20%, stabilized after the fevered stage. They didn't turn. With proper care, hydration, fever management, and a regimen of antivirals I'd developed through desperate experimentation, they recovered. I kept meticulous records. Case histories, treatment protocols, blood work, recovery rates. The evidence was becoming irrefutable. The infection had a window during which intervention could prevent complete transformation. The military's protocol of immediate execution wasn't just cruel, it was scientifically unsound. I knew the risks I was taking. If discovered, I would face execution as a traitor, endangering others through my misguided compassion, as they would surely call it. But each life saved affirmed my conviction that this was necessary work. 2 weeks ago, everything changed. While searching the military command center's medical database for treatment information, I discovered files marked Project Threshold. I shouldn't have had access to them, but a clerical error had placed them in the General Infectious Disease Protocols folder. The files contained research mirroring my own findings, dating back to the early days of the outbreak. Military scientists had identified the same window of opportunity I had discovered. They knew that with proper treatment, certain cases of exposure could be reversed. Yet the execution protocol remained in place. The files referenced population management concerns and resource allocation priorities. Cold, bureaucratic language, disguising a horrifying truth. They were killing people who could be saved because saving them was deemed too costly, too resource-intensive, too complicated for mass implementation. Worse, the files contained evidence of premature executions, people being resolved before the certainty of their transformation was established. The acceptable margin of error was listed as 12%. 12% of people killed who might never have turned. I downloaded everything I could, smuggled the data back to my subway sanctuary. My team and I pored over it, confirming what we had suspected but feared to believe. The government was willfully executing salvageable human beings for expediency. We had just finished analyzing the last of the files when the proximity alarm triggered. Someone had entered the main concourse of the subway station. We immediately implemented our security protocol, dimming lights, moving patients to the secondary chamber beyond the turnstiles, preparing for evacuation if necessary. Through the security camera I'd installed, I watched a single figure descend the stairs into the station, military uniform, weapon drawn, moving with the careful precision of special forces. A scout, not a full raid team, which meant this might be reconnaissance rather than a targeted operation. I had seconds to decide. If this was discovery, running would only delay the inevitable. Military forces would lock down every exit, sweep the tunnels, capture or kill us all. My work would be destroyed, the truth buried again. But if this was chance, a routine patrol or a soldier seeking shelter, perhaps there was another option. I stepped out into the concourse, hands raised, alone. "This is a medical facility," I called out. "I'm unarmed." The soldier swung toward me, rifle raised, then hesitated. Even in the dim emergency lighting, I could see confusion in his posture. "Identify yourself," he demanded, keeping his distance. "Dr. Zahir Nasser, formerly of Metropolitan General. I run a treatment center for the early infected." His rifle didn't waver. "Early infected get executed, that's protocol." "Is that what you believe or what you've been told?" The soldier took a step closer and I could see his face now. Young, maybe mid-20s, with a hardness in his eyes that came from seeing too much death. "What's the difference?" he asked. "The difference is whether you're following orders based on truth or convenient lies." He studied me for a long moment. "You have infected down here? Right now?" "I have patients. People exposed to the contagion who are responding to treatment." "That's impossible. Infection is irreversible." "That's what they want you to believe." I took a calculated risk. "Scout Walsh, isn't it? I recognize you from the checkpoint rotations." He stiffened. "How do you know my name?" "Because I worked intake screenings, the same place you lost your sister 3 months ago." His finger tensed on the trigger. "You don't know anything about my sister." "Exposure via laceration to the right forearm, minimal contact. She was in the early stages, barely symptomatic. They took her to resolution anyway." Walsh's expression flickered between anger and uncertainty. "She was infected. There was nothing they could do." "That's not true. And I can prove it." I slowly reached into my pocket and withdrew a data drive. "This contains classified research from Project Threshold. Military scientists have known from the beginning that early-stage infection can be treated in certain cases. They chose execution anyway. Your sister might have been saved." Walsh didn't lower his weapon, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm offering to show you my patients. People with exposure identical to your sister's who are alive and recovering." For what felt like an eternity, we stood in tense silence. Then, slowly, he lowered his rifle. "Show me." I led him through the turnstiles to our treatment area, explaining our protocols as we walked. The quarantine measures, the stages of care, our success rates. He remained silent, taking it all in, his expression unreadable. In the main treatment room, 6 patients lay on, repurposed subway benches converted to beds. They were in various stages of recovery, from feverish delirium to conscious alertness. All had visible wounds where they'd been exposed, now carefully cleaned and bandaged. Elena was checking vital signs. Darius stood guard at the far entrance, and Michaela was administering medication through IV lines we'd salvaged from abandoned hospitals. They all froze when they saw Walsh, hands moving instinctively toward hidden weapons. "It's all right," I said. "Scout Walsh is here to learn the truth." Walsh moved from bed to bed, examining the patients with a soldier's skepticism and a brother's desperate hope. He asked pointed questions about their exposure times, symptoms, treatment protocols. I answered truthfully, showing him our records, our successes, and our failures. "This patient," I said, indicating a middle-aged man sleeping fitfully on a corner bed, "was bitten 27 hours ago. According to military protocol, he should have turned completely by now. But his fever is stabilizing, and cognitive tests show no degradation. We expect full recovery within a week." Walsh stared at the man, then at me. "How many?" "We've treated 62 patients over 3 months. 14 have fully recovered and been relocated to safe zones under new identities. 28 died, despite treatment. The rest are in various stages of recovery." "And you did this with scavenged supplies in a subway station with no official support? Imagine what could be done with proper facilities, proper funding." Walsh was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. "My sister's name was Kara. She was a kindergarten teacher before all this. She got scratched helping a child at one of the refugee centers. The scratch wasn't deep. She wasn't even showing symptoms when they took her away. I'm sorry. They wouldn't let me see her, said it was too dangerous, that she was already turning." His voice hardened. "Was that a lie too?" I hesitated, weighing truth against compassion. Based on our research and the military's own data, yes, it was likely a lie. Walsh's hand tightened on his rifle, but it remained pointed at the floor. "What do you need?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "To expand this, to save more people." "What do you need?" Understanding dawned. "Medications, antibiotics, antivirals, fever reducers, clean water, power supplies, and protection. The military will shut us down if they find us." "They'll kill you if they find you," he corrected bluntly. "What you're doing violates every containment protocol. They'll classify you as terrorist-level threats. We know the risks." Walsh was quiet, again thinking. Then he slung his rifle over his shoulder in a gesture of trust. "My unit patrols this sector every 2 weeks. I can divert attention from this location, maybe redirect some supplies." "Why would you help us?" "Because if you're right, they murdered my sister, and they're still murdering others." It was more than I had hoped for. An ally within the military itself could make our work significantly more sustainable. But there was something in his expression, a calculation beyond simple revenge or justice. "There's something else," I prompted. Walsh nodded. "I'm not the only one who's lost someone to questionable protocols. There are others in my unit, in other units who have doubts, who've seen things that don't add up." "A network within the military?" "Not yet, but it could be." The implications were staggering. Not just a small underground operation saving dozens, but a movement that could challenge the protocols themselves, that could implement large-scale treatment rather than execution. It would be dangerous, I cautioned, for all of us. More dangerous than keeping the truth buried? Than letting them continue executing people who could be saved? He had a point. What began as my personal mission to atone for the patients I'd sent to their deaths had evolved into something larger, something that might actually change the course of how humanity handled this plague. "How do we proceed?" I asked. "Carefully. I need to review your data, confirm everything you've shown me. Then I'll make contact with others I trust. We build slowly, verify everything, protect this location at all costs." For the first time in months, I felt genuine hope, not just the satisfaction of saving individual lives, but the possibility of systemic change. That was 2 days ago. Walsh has returned twice since then, bringing supplies and information. He's confirmed that Project Threshold continues under high security at the main research facility, that military scientists are refining treatments similar to mine, while the execution protocol remains in place. More disturbingly, he's discovered that infection rates are being manipulated in official reports. The outbreak isn't growing as rapidly as the military claims. The proportion of the population that's naturally immune is higher than reported. The justification for extreme measures is based on exaggerated threat assessments. Today, Walsh is bringing someone else, a military doctor who worked on Project Threshold before being reassigned for questioning methodologies. If we can convince her to join us to bring her expertise to our operation, we might improve our treatment success rate significantly. The risks grow with each new person who knows our secret. The military has intensified patrols in neighboring sectors, though Walsh insists it's not related to our operation. Still, I've implemented additional security measures, established new escape routes, distributed our research to multiple secure locations in case we need to abandon this facility quickly. I checked the time. Walsh and the doctor should arrive within the hour. Elena is preparing our most stable patients for relocation to a secondary site as a precaution. Darius and Michaela are screening 2 new patients brought in last night, both military personnel exposed during a containment breach. That's another development Walsh has shared. Increasing numbers of military personnel are being exposed during operations. The infected are behaving differently, more strategically, as if adapting to military tactics. The official stance attributes this to random mutations, but some officers have begun to whisper about directed evolution, about the possibility that the infection itself is developing intelligence. I'm skeptical of such theories, but I've seen enough supposedly impossible things in recent months to keep an open mind. If the infected are evolving, adapting, it makes our work even more crucial. Understanding the progression of the disease, how it affects neural pathways, how some survive while others succumb, might be key to humanity's long-term survival. The proximity alarm sounds, signaling someone at the entrance. Through the security camera, I can see Walsh, accompanied by a woman in civilian clothes who must be the doctor. They're early, which suggests urgency. As I move to greet them, I consider how far this has come from that first desperate act of compassion toward a mother and child. One small choice to value humanity over protocol has cascaded into a movement that might change everything. I don't know if we'll succeed. The forces against us are powerful, entrenched in systems designed to prioritize control over compassion, expediency over ethics. But for the first time since the world collapsed, I'm fighting for something more than mere survival. I'm fighting for the truth, for the lives that can be saved if we have the courage to try, for the possibility that even in this broken world, humanity might find its way back to its better nature. The doctor enters with Walsh, her eyes widening as she takes in our makeshift facility. I extend my hand in greeting, ready to welcome her to our dangerous, necessary work. Dr. Zahir Nasser, I introduce myself. Welcome to the place where we remember that every life matters.